everybody. Welcome back to Go Read Some Comics with me, Professor Jenna. It has been quite a week since I talked to you guys last. There are some things that I am not going to dwell on, but there are some things that I just have to celebrate. First and foremost, my Fantastic Four and I are reuniting on Wednesday, October 30th to talk about the finale of Agatha All Along. We're going live on BD's YouTube channel immediately after the finale, so probably around 10 p.m. Eastern unless those episodes are extra long. I'll put a link in the description so you know where to go. I would really, really love it if you would join us, whether that's hopping in the live chat or watching on YouTube after the fact. It would mean the world. Already, the responses that we've gotten have made us all so happy. And secondly, James Gunn had some kind words to say about my Creature Commandos video. I interviewed James before Peacemaker Season 1, and we've interacted on social media a couple times, but never in my wildest dreams did I imagine that I would get this kind of love, especially from like the very first video that I uploaded on this channel. I honestly am still at a loss for words, but thank you. This really solidified for me that this has the potential to be something special. Thank you all so much for subscribing, especially if you came from James's post. I have a bunch of different ideas for how to grow this channel, for how to keep yapping about stuff, and I am so glad that I have people joining me on that journey. Today's topic is something that has been heavily requested thus far, which that in and of itself makes me really happy, and luckily it is something that I have so many thoughts on, which is DC's Absolute Universe. For those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, which for the record is totally okay, we are a judgment-free channel. The Absolute Universe is a new imprint at DC. It is set in a different continuity from the main universe, and it is overseen by Scott Snyder, who is best known for writing Court of Owls, Justice League, Metal, Death Metal. It sets out to kind of reimagine the DC universe from the ground up. It allows for creators to come in, pick a character, and kind of reimagine their origin, recontextualize what they mean, and go from there. The Absolute Universe kind of kicks off with the DC All-In special, which was written by Snyder with Joshua Williamson and has art by Daniel Sampere, Wes Craig, and Dan Mora. It's in a beautiful flip book, which I am a sucker for the record. One half of the flip book really gets into the main DCU, reestablishing the Justice League, who have been absent for the past couple years. The status quo seems very similar to the JLU animated series, where everyone can kind of come and go from the Watchtower. It is a multi-generational, multifaceted league filled with a lot of people and not just 7. For the record, I love that, and I think that it's going to be really fun to see that explored even further. But then Darkseid proves to be an interesting catalyst of the entire event. He has the realization that he literally represents all of the control and constraint that has kind of kept the heroes at bay across the multiverse. This is the reason why he doesn't have a doppelganger in the multiverse itself. And now that the multiverse has kind of ebbed and flowed across the past couple years of DC canon, his power seems to be super concentrated. And so he, of course, wants to use that for his own means. And in the process, the Absolute Universe is born. And it is a world where heroes are kind of starting as the underdogs. They don't have the force of good. They have literal dark side energy ruminating throughout the universe, and that is going to kind of put them at an interesting disadvantage. This is personally my favorite thing that DC has done with Darkseid since maybe Final Crisis at this point. I think it's a really cool way to kind of exemplify what he means as a character. I think it's a cool way to make him an antagonist to the entire DC universe of heroes, and now the multiverse to an extent, without having to character assassinate him, make him overpowered, any of those kind of things. I think that the way that they handle it in the All-In special is just absolutely brilliant. And so that brings us to Absolute Batman #1, which is written by Snyder with art by Nick Dragotta and colors by Frank Martin and lettering by Clayton Cowles. This book is outstanding. There are no ifs, ands, or buts about it. As soon as I could get my hands on an early copy, I absolutely devoured this, and there were scenes that, full disclosure, I would lie awake in bed at night and kind of think about, and I cannot remember the last time a comic had that level of an impact on me. I almost don't want to get too far into spoilers here, because reading this book is such a singularly euphoric experience that I kind of want everyone to have for themselves, but needless to say, this is not the Bruce Wayne that you know and love. He's not a playboy, he is a middle-class civil engineer. He didn't have the same inciting incident that main universe Bruce does, and honestly, the flashbacks to this event kind of usurp the Wayne murders for me in being really poignant and really heartbreaking. He has a very different relationship with his rogues gallery, to the point where I don't even know how they're going to become his rogues gallery. He has a basically non-existent relationship with Alfred, who is an MI6 agent on Bruce's tail. That conceit alone produces some of the coolest sequences I've seen in a Batman comic in a really long time. People love to misuse the term cinematic when talking about comics, I think because we don't really have the vocabulary to talk about something building upon itself, reaching that level of euphoria that you kind of get from Rocky hitting the top of the stairs. But there is a special category for comics that make you feel like you have background music playing in your head. The ending of Ultimate Spider-Man #1 definitely has that for me, and the main fight scene in this book does too. There is something about the visuals that Nick Dragotta puts together, the ways that Bruce utilizes the different components of his costume, the ways that we jump back and forth in time. It is just so special in a way that makes me profoundly happy. The next book in the Absolute line is Absolute Wonder Woman, which is written by Kelly Thompson, who is currently writing the Birds of Prey ongoing of my dreams, with art by Hayden Sherman, colors by Jordi Belair, and lettering by Becca Carey. This book is outstanding. I know I sound like a broken record at this point, especially after yapping about Absolute Batman for several minutes, but I am not being facetious at how good this book is. The general conceit is that Diana of Themyscira was not actually raised in Themyscira in this universe. As an infant, she was taken and raised in hell. It's not really a spoiler to say that Cersei is the one who becomes her surrogate mother, which is a dynamic that is really, really compelling to me, especially considering the fact that most of the Diana-Cersei content we've gotten in the past has either been friends, frenemies, kind of on the same playing field. It's really interesting to place her as this maternal figure to baby Diana. This book tugs on your heartstrings in ways that you can't even think are possible. There is so much that Kelly manages to pack in about motherhood, about just personhood, about all of these things. I will get into one spoiler because I can't really dance around it. The coolest thing of this issue to me is how they handled the term Amazon. When the gods drop Diana off at Cersei, they literally ban her from saying the word Amazon. It's very similar to the way that Agatha Long kind of dealt with Teen's sigil in the early episodes of you literally cannot make the noise, it just censors it for you. And it is such an interesting choice to me because I feel like when we talk about Diana, when we talk about Wonder Woman, when we talk about just the pop cultural impact of Wonder Woman, Amazons are always first and foremost. Sometimes that's a really great thing. Sometimes we get really beautiful works of art like Historia. I find that sometimes the Amazon part of Diana's identity is kind of utilized as a crutch, and some people misinterpret it and some people just oversimplify it. And I think taking that off of the playing field, at least in the early starts of Diana's life, is a really profound choice. It also culminates in her reclaiming that part of her identity in such a cool and beautiful way. Plus, I mean, how can you not love this character design? Having the tattoos, having the comically large sword, having a skeleton Pegasus that she rides into battle, having this be such a core part of her identity from the jump is going to be so compelling, I think, going forward. It's also going to birth some amazing cosplays, I have a feeling. Batman and Wonder Woman are just two of the Absolute books that are on the horizon. Absolute Superman is debuting this November from writer Jason Aaron and artist Rafa Sandoval. I know fans' expectations are high for this book, especially given how Batman and Wonder Woman knocked it out of the park right out of the gate. Plus, I feel like we've gotten more alternate retellings of Superman's identity and origin story, including the greatest show of all time, Smallville. It seems, based on what we've seen so far, that this is really going to be a working class Superman, which, if you know your history, if you know Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, that was kind of the original thesis statement of Superman, and I love getting back to that. I especially love getting back to that in a modern context, because Lord knows there's a lot we can talk about there. And then after that comes the second wave of Absolute books, which unfortunately are not launching until March of next year, but I have a feeling they will be well worth the wait. I also do love that this original trinity of books gets a couple months to really kind of stand on their own. Instead of oversaturating the market, oversaturating people's wallets, I think that's the right call. We have Absolute Flash from Jeff Lemire and Nick Robles. I think this has really interesting potential. I love that Wally is at the center of the story because depending on who you ask, he is the superior Flash. On the surface, this one feels the most like it could almost fit in the main universe, so I'm really curious what the extra hook is going to be here. The rogues look really cool. And then after Absolute Flash is Absolute Green Lantern, written by Al Ewing with art by Janoy Lindsay. I love how little we know about this book. We know it's a first contact story. We know Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart and Joe Mullen, who is of Far Sector, one of the best Green Lantern stories of the 21st century. They're all going to play a role, but we really don't know how. It doesn't sound like the Guardians of Oa are really going to play a role in this series at all. How do the police force of the Green Lantern really operate without their governing body? As someone who loves Bronze Age Green Lantern, who loves the Guardians in their own weird, goofy way, I think that could be really a compelling plot point. And then the Wave 2 book that I'm definitely the most excited for is Absolute Martian Manhunter from Dennis Camp and Javier Rodriguez. Dennis Camp is killing it on Marvel's Ultimates right now. If you are not reading that book, I highly recommend you change that as quickly as humanly possible. And I love that he is getting to tell really interesting alternate stories in both the Marvel and DC universes. I think that the conceit of this, the retro aesthetic, the character design for how Jean works is unbelievable. Seeing that Javier Rodriguez literally sculpted the first model out of Play-Doh absolutely delighted me. The plot synopsis we have is that John Jones, FBI agent, is going to have his body taken over by an alien who best defines itself as Martian because there is really no other definition otherwise, and that leads them both to kind of lose their minds a little bit. I'm very curious to see what the series is going to say about law enforcement, where it's even going to be set. I wouldn't be surprised if this is some sort of period piece. So after all of my yapping about the Absolute books, after explaining the core concepts and the battle swords and the battle axes, you might be wondering, why should I care? There's so many comics that I could be picking up each month. There's so much media I could be consuming each month that is trying to steal my attention away in different ways. What is it about these books that is really worth the investment? I think the answer to that is very multifaceted. First and foremost, it is a miracle that these books are existing concurrently to ongoing runs in the main DC universe that are also very high quality. I know Twitter is going to Twitter and have their varying opinions on things, but you cannot deny that the current Wonder Woman run, Action Comics, Superman, Batman have all knocked it out of the park to varying degrees and have helped kind of reinvigorate those characters on a publishing level. It feels like a really interesting contrast to Marvel's current Ultimate Universe, which is filled with books that are simultaneously on par with the main universe storytelling that a lot of people are getting and are also leaps and bounds ahead of it. I mentioned Ultimate Spider-Man earlier in this video. That is a book that is so stratospherically different from its main universe counterpart that it is absolutely wild to witness month after month. Every single time I finish reading an issue, this is basically my reaction to Jonathan Hickman.
You can't keep getting away with it!
I also mentioned the Ultimates earlier in this video. I love that Dennis Camp has been able to touch so much of the Ultimate Marvel universe just in the course of that book. The Fantastic Four issue took my breath away in ways that I was not prepared for in any way, shape, or form. It is the most heartbreaking single issue of anything related to Fantastic Four that I have read in a very, very long time. And I love recommending it and shoving it into people's hands, even though I know it is going to make them extremely sad. All of that to say, DC having that level of potential across both its main line and its AU line feels like something we're celebrating. I don't care where you fall on the Marvel versus DC debate. I don't care if you haven't really interacted with these characters outside of the movies. These are inherently accessible books. They also feel special because they prove the malleability of the characters within these stories. We all culturally know Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman status quo. We know the general idea of the Flash, Green Lantern, Martian Manhunter, but getting the ability to kind of rebuild their lore from the ground up in a way that is both reverential and accessible just feels so rare in the grand scheme of things. And Scott Snyder has said that at very least the main trinity of the books are going to be going for at least 2 years. Who knows about the other spin-offs beyond that? Who knows what other spin-offs might potentially be part of it? But the idea of getting stories where the absolute trinity meets for the first time and maybe form some sort of Justice League and the main universe and absolute heroes meet, that legitimately keeps me up at night. It makes me so excited for the future of comics, especially seeing all of the stores post that they have lines around the block and copies constantly sold out. It makes me happy that even in single issues, these are stories people really want to read. It also feels like the absolute universe is harnessing something that I personally think we need in order to keep superhero comics going, which is more perennials and more jumping on points for young readers. In terms of perennials, DC has been absolutely knocking that out of the park already. They have the DC Compacts that are selling like hotcakes. The DC Finest are launching very soon. I could make a whole separate video just on how brilliant of a publishing decision that is and how I think it's going to get new readers, old readers, manga readers, people who've never picked up a comic before in their entire life into comics in a really brilliant way. We already saw when the DCU slate was announced that All-Star Superman, Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, Booster Gold Volume 1 all completely sold out on Amazon. So having a single volume that you can hand to someone or point to help them fall in love with a character is honestly essential for the medium going forward. And the idea of having that for both main and absolute universe for as many characters as humanly possible is honestly really brilliant. And as far as the second point goes, people forget sometimes in ways that are both hilarious and frustrating that comics need to be sold to more than just people with disposable income who whine about superhero movies on the internet. The experience of being a kid, walking into a comic shop, picking up a comic, and falling in love with the medium is something I wish could happen to every single kid. It's honestly a little disheartening sometimes to think about kids who have that reading experience and are met with 80 years of lore that they can't possibly understand, or a sequel to some event from the 90s or aughts that they weren't even alive for, or characters who they're told are important because there's movies about them or their parents like them or something along those lines, but they don't feel like those characters are actually theirs. The absolute universe feels like it's combating that problem right now and making comics that multiple generations, and especially the youngest generation who's just getting into comics, can find something to love. There was a tweet going around about Absolute Batman that said this must have been what it was like to read Spawn in the 1990s as a 10-year-old kid, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. However long it ultimately lasts Fast Four, I feel like the youngest generation that is going to be reading it is probably going to have so many core memories and core feelings formed out of it. And that makes me happier than words can express. Now, when I was working on this video, my friend JJ tweeted at me and wondered if I would work my wish list for the Absolute Universe into this video. I don't want to get too far into the weeds on that because I feel like the beauty of this imprint so far has been how genuinely unpredictable it is. I never in a million years would have imagined these books working in the way that they are, and I don't want to jinx it by just kind of self-inserting my ideas. I do have some crumbs that I would like to see though. I selfishly want to see how Black Canary and Green Arrow work in this universe, whether as characters in their own books or characters in another book. I think that there's so much potential there. I already love all of the memes joking about how Absolute Oliver was raised by the lions that killed his parents. I also saw a theory, which goes back to the flip book cover, which is that every character on the main DC side might get their own book in the Absolute Universe, which at this point would leave Starfire, Zatanna, and Booster Gold, who, spoiler alert, has been thrown from the main universe to the Absolute Universe. I think this would be awesome. An Absolute Zatanna book would become my entire personality, and I would love to see how Starfire would work, especially if we're so far away from potentially getting the Titans. And who knows, maybe Absolute Booster is about main universe Booster in the Absolute Universe, or is about a completely different take on Booster that we're not expecting. I feel like either option would be really, really cool. Have you been enjoying the Absolute Universe so far? Are there any books that I've successfully sold you on? If so, I'm gonna wear that as a badge of honor. Please leave your thoughts in the comments below. I would really, really appreciate it if you did. Don't forget to like and subscribe and follow me on social media at Hey It's Jenna Lynn. I have a couple video ideas already cooking, and I'm so excited to make them a reality for you all. Thank you all so much for watching. Again, I am blown away by the response to this channel so far. It makes me so happy and so ready to keep it going. And as always, go read some comics.